Two massive mafia enforcers just boxed a crying girl into a dark alley, but they are the ones who are about to beg for mercy. Penelope looked like a sluggish, helpless clerk with a battered yellow umbrella. But when the city's deadliest kingpin threatened her, her fake stutter instantly vanished. She calmly looked the devil in the eye and showed him a tablet proving she had entirely drained his secret Swiss bank accounts. She doesn't want to run from the mob. She wants to control them. Welcome to the Midnight Hour. Tonight, you and I are stepping into a story of quiet deception, the kind that slowly bleeds a man dry. People looked at Penelope Cartwright and saw a weak ghost to rot in a beige cubicle. Nobody gave her stained cardigans or nervous stutter a second thought. But let me share a simple life lesson with you. Never judge a wounded soul by the shadows they choose to wear. Lorenzo Bianca, the ruthless king of Chicago crime, learned that the hard way. He walked into her office expecting a trembling lamb. Instead, he stepped blindly into the waiting jaws of an apex predator, a woman holding a digital match to his entire empire. She was never his victim. She was his absolute ruin. It all began on the 42nd floor of Pendleton Financial. This player's flawless wealth management firm. But to the desperate man bleeding in the shadows, it was the slickest money laundering machine in the West. Buried in the suffocator and darks of the archives room sat 26-year-old Penelope, and she was the office ghost, drowning in drab wool sweaters, eyes cemented to the floor whenever spoken to. Her cruel co-workers mocked her behind her back, and her arrogant boss, Arthur, treated her like a broken piece of furniture. It brings us to a very simple life lesson. How you treat the invisible people in your room tells the world exactly who you really are. And let me tell you, every single person on that floor was spectacularly failing the basic test of humanity. Arthur had this cruel habit of dropping wrecked ledgers onto her desk right before quitting time on a Friday. He fully expected them magically cured by Monday, and Penelope always delivered. She never shed a tear, never begged for a raise, and just pushed up her thick glasses before disappearing into the math. Everyone in that cold office assumed she was starving for the smallest crumb of validation. But they were deeply mistaken. Here is a simple life lesson. The people who stay perfectly silent are always the ones paying the closest attention. Penelope did not care about Arthur or his empty praise. She only cared about the puzzle. The numbers were the only language that never lied to quietly exposing the fatal arrogance of every man in that building. For 3 agonizing years, this quiet girl had been secretly translate the darkest confessions of the Chicago underworld. She knew exactly whose dirty blood money she was washing. She memorized every shell company, every routing number, and every quiet bribe handed to the local judges. More importantly, she saw every fatal error her clueless boss missed. But the fragile illusion at Pendleton Financial shattered completely on a dark, rainy Tuesday. The oak doors violently swung open and the air in the room turned to ice. Lorenzo Bianchi had finally arrived. He was a terrifying force of nature, his expensive charcoal suit perfectly hiding the heavy iron of his shoulder holster. The lesson here is simple true chaos rarely bothers to knock before it kicks your front door in. Lorenzo moved with the terrifying, silent grace of a terrifying predator. He knew he held the fragile power of life and death over every soul breathing his air. With hollow eyes and a legacy built on spilled blood, his brutal syndicate owned the entire city underground. He marched straight into Arthur's glass office, shadowed by 2 massive bodyguards. From her cramped desk in the dim corner, Penelope watched the agonizing drama unfold through the dusty blinds. Arthur turned the color of wet ash, his expensive silk tie suddenly looking a lot like a hangman's rope. Lorenzo finally spoke, his velvet voice slicing clean through the glass. "We have a discrepancy," he whispered. "Here is a simple life lesson to remember: sheer, unavoidable terror will always strip the mask off a hollow man." Arthur was practically weeping, trembling violently as he swore every single cent was accounted for. But Lorenzo just leaned slowly over that mahogany desk and delivered an absolute nightmare. $40 million, Arthur. 40 million completely vanished from the waterfront account into a Geneva ghost firm, a transfer Arthur allegedly authorized. Arthur collapsed deep into his leather chair, gasping for air. Panicking, he immediately threw his entire team to the wolves, sobbing that it had to be a computer glitch. "Here is a simple life lesson for you. A weak and cowardly leader will always blame their own people when the flames get too hot." Lorenzo just stared at him with empty eyes, set a suppressed pistol on the disc, and whispered that he did not believe in glitches. Lorenzo delivered his brutal ultimatum. Arthur had exactly 24 hours to find the missing cash, or the entire debt would be paid in blood. The air in that office instantly turned to heavy lead. Every single employee froze, paralyzed by the raw terror suffocating the room. Everyone, that is, except for Penelope. Standing quietly by the blinking printer, she did not shake at all. As the most dangerous man in Chicago locked his dead eyes onto hers, she let out a faint, tired sigh and actually rolled her eyes at him, a microscopic slip in her armor. Lorenzo, a man who breathed fear for a living, stopped dead in his tracks. He studied this invisible girl. Here is a simple life lesson: the most dangerous predators hide in plain sight, waiting for pure arrogance to blind you. She wore the brilliant disguise of weak prey, but behind those thick frames, her gaze was absolute steel. Lorenzo pointed a black leather glove at her, his dark voice cutting the dead silence to demand her name. Sweating and desperate to survive, Arthur rushed forward. He dismissed her as a nobody, a pathetic clerk, frantically waving her away. Penelope clutched her stack of papers, flawlessly stepping back into the role of the frightened victim.
"Penelope, she whispered, her voice cracking with perfect engineered fear.
But Lorenzo was already hooked. He stepped right into her spacey, a looming shadow of death. "Did you roll your eyes at me?" he asked. Life teaches us a simple lesson: the loudest voices rarely hold the real power. True control is always silent and calculating. Penelope shrank back against the wall, her hands trembling right on cue. She stammered out a pathetic excuse about a bad astigmatism and tired eyes. Lorenzo let the heavy silence stretch out. He knew she was lying. Her terrified act was flawless, but he could feel the freezing intellect hiding just beneath her skin. Leaning in close, he dropped his voice to a grave whisper. 24 hours. He politely suggested she help her boss find the money before it was too late. The second the heavy doors closed behind him, the office exploded into pure chaos. While Arthur screamed at the room to tear the servers apart, Penelope simply walked back to her desk. Here is a simple life lesson: real power is perfectly calm while weakness panics. She had already won the entire war. Stick with me here, because this is where the truth comes into the light. Penelope did not need 24 hours to find that missing cash. She knew exactly where those $40 million were resting, because she was the invisible mastermind who stole them 3 weeks ago. Later that bitter evening, heavy, freezing rain poured down as she walked home, taking short towards a pitch black, blinding white headlights suddenly pinned her against the wet brick. A dark vehicle cut off her escape, and two massive enforcers stepped out into the storm. They smiled, convinced they had cornered a helpless mouse. But life offers a very simple lesson sometimes. When you believe you are hunting weak prey, you are actually stepping straight into the jaws of a silent predator. The heavy door swung open, and Lorenzo stepped out into the freezing downpour. Hidden beneath a black umbrella, the bleeding city lights cast him in long, dangerous shadows. An astigmatism, he murmured softly, slowly pacing toward her. He casually mentioned speaking to his doctor, noting that bad eyes rarely cause you to roll them when a loaded gun is on the table. Penelope stood frozen in the rain, her yellow umbrella shivering in the cold wind. She desperately slid back into character, begging to just go home and feed her cats. Lorenzo let out a deep, haunting laugh that cut right through the storm. He ordered her to drop the exhausted act. Here is a harsh life lesson. You can only play the innocent fool for so long before the real players see the cold steel hiding underneath. Lorenzo laid out the brutal truth. He knew Arthur lacked the spine to steal $40 million. His men spent 6 agonizing hours tracing that Geneva account, hitting a firewall so vicious it burned their servers. Stepping closer, his dark voice dripped with dangerous admiration. He knew she was the only soul in that room without a racing heart. Now, you and I finally get to use the beautiful shift. Penelope took a slow, deep breath. The pathetic shaking stopped completely. Her broken posture melted into the freezing rain. She straightened her spine, and suddenly, the invisible clerk owned the dark alley. Here is a simple life lesson: real power never needs to scream to be felt. She simply looked up at the most dangerous man in the city, and she smiled. Today, you and I will unpack a brilliant deception. Watch the shadows of that alleyway where a terrifying shift happens. That fragile aura Penelope carried, it evaporates like breath on cold glass. What remains is a freezing energy that holds the blood of a seasoned mafia boss. The stutter vanishes entirely. She stares Lorenzo dead in the eyes, dropping a heavy truth. His men just walked into a snare she set 30 days ago. By sunrise, forged evidence will chain his family to a murdered senator. Lorenzo is drowning in panic. His hand shakes as he grabs his weapon. But Penelope remains perfectly still. She looks past the trembling steel, advising him to reconsider. It leaves us with a simple lesson. The quietest souls in the rooms are usually the ones holding the winning hand. Penelope brings the heavy hammer down without hesitation. She tells him straight up that if her pulse flatlines or she misses her midnight check-in, a dead man switch flips instantly. Every hidden ledger and paid-off politician will flood the morning papers. Lorenzo stands there, genuine shock freezing his lungs. This man spent his life breaking hardened killers in dark basements. Yet here is a girl in a soaked beige cardigan, pointing a digital sniper rifle straight at his legacy. He hisses through his teeth, trying desperately to call her bluff. She just stares right back, reaching into her canvas bag with agonizing calm. This gives us a striking reminder. The most dangerous person is rarely the one making the loudest noise, but rather the one who commands the absolute silence. The tension in that alley is thick enough to choke on. The enforcers have their weapons raised, but Lorenzo slowly lifts a hand to stop them. Penelope turns her glowing tablet toward his face. His guarded offshore account reads absolutely zero. She looks the aging boss in the eye and delivers the fatal blow. She is not the thief. The man bleeding his empire dry is Ricardo, the exact boy he pulled from the gutter and raised like his own son. Ricardo has been skimming for 2 years, hoarding $40 million to fund a hostile takeover and assassinate Lorenzo tomorrow. The color completely drains from the old man's face. It gives us a bitter truth about blind devotion. The hand you feed is often the very same hand gripping the dagger behind your back. This betrayal cuts Lorenzo to the bone. Ricardo was the kid he protected during violent nights on the streets. Yet that empty bank balance is a cold fact. The aging crime boss goes completely still, his voice dropping by a dangerous whisper as he demands his money. Penelope simply shrugs, treating $40 million like pocket change. When Ricardo tried to move the cash, she grabbed it mid-flight, scattering the funds through the maze of encrypt vaults. She holds the only key. Lorenzo stares at her, his mind spinning as is the only logical question left. Why not just take the cash and vanish in us into the night? We often assume money is the ultimate prize, but here is a vital lesson. Those who actually survive know that true security demands something far more permanent than wealth. A hollow laugh escapes Penelope. Run away, exactly. She lays out the brutal reality. She is 26 years old with 0 street survival skills. If she tried to run, Lorenzo or Ricardo would easily track her down and bury her. She tilts her head, locking eyes with the hardened boss. Running is boring, she whispers. She prefers having total control. Right now, she holds his $40 million, the proof of the betrayal, and the digital keys to his entire empire. She owns him, plain and simple. The rain beats down on the pavement as Lorenzo stares at her, realizing the ruthless monster hiding inside that ordinary cardigan. It brings us to a harsh reality we must all face. True power never has to raise its voice to prove it belongs at the head of the table. Sticks with me on this one because the mental warfare is about to escalate. A rough bark of laughter escapes Lorenzo. He tells her to get in the car before he forgets how valuable her life just became. The scene shifts to a hidden safe house, a concrete fortress buried deep in the dark woods inside. The air is thick with paranoia. Dominic, his fierce second command, is shouting until his lungs burn, losing his mind over the betrayal. Yet, seated quietly on a simple bar stool, is Penelope. She remains totally untouched by the aggressive energy of these trained killers, completely ignoring their raised weapons. It reminds us of a deeply important life lesson. Real strength is having Sabi gain the profound discipline to sit perfectly calm in the silent eye of a raging hurricane. The tension trapped inside that concrete room is suffocating. Penelope has traded her soaked cardigan for a dark shirt, her fingers flying across 2 glowing laptops. Dominic violently slams his fist onto the granite counter, roaring that Ricardo would never turn against the family. He is convinced this girl is weaving lies, dismissing her as a glorified calculator. He demands they put a bullet in her right now, but Lorenzo stands quietly in the shadows, taking a slow sip of his scotch. He completely ignores his screaming lieutenant. His dark eyes are locked onto Penelope, fascinated by her total absence of fear. This teaches us a subtle lesson about human nature. Those who rely purely on loud intimidation are usually the very first to lose their actual power. Penelope does not even flinch at the outburst. Her eyes stay locked on the screens as she explains that if Dominic pulls that trigger, her keys will scramble. Lorenzo would lose his millions, and authorities would map his operation before sunrise. She politely suggests Dominic calm down. The massive enforcer snaps, pulling his pistol and lunging toward her. Lorenzo's deep voice cuts through the room. He does not shout, he simply demands obedience, ordering his man to back off. Dominic freezes, screaming that the boss is being manipulated. Penelope's fingers stop moving. She hits the enter key with a sharp, echoing crack. Check your phone, Dominic. It is a powerful life lesson. Physical force means absolutely nothing when your opponent holds all of your darkest secrets. Dominic frowns, pulling out his encrypted device. You can see the exact second his heart drops into his stomach. Displayed on the screen is a raw transcript of a secret call he made to his mistress, complete with GPS logs and clear audio. Penelope takes a deliberate, slow sip of her water. She looks at the towering man and reveals the devastating truth. She has root access to every single device inside that fortress. She explains, her voice terrifyingly calm, that she can wipe out his bank accounts, erase his identity, or forward his worst sins to his wife before he even pulls the trigger. She stares down this hardened killer without blinking. This moment perfectly illustrates a profound lesson. A sharp, calculating mind backed by the right leverage will always shatter mindless muscle. A suffocating silence crashes over the kitchen. These hardened men stare at Penelope with creeping horror. It finally dawns on them that she is not their hostage. She is the warden, and they are trapped inside her cage. Lorenzo watches a dangerous smile pulling at his mouth. He respects the sheer ruthlessness of it. He turns to speak, but the words never leave his throat. The heavy steel door violently explodes inward. The blast shatters the glass, sending deadly shards flying everywhere. Armed mercenaries pour through the thick smoke, their rifles tearing the room apart. Ricardo did not wait for tomorrow. Lorenzo draws his weapon, returning heavy fire. It teaches us a brutal lesson about survival. Just when you think you have mastered the board, your opponent flips the entire table. Let us look at this piece by piece together. Absolute chaos consumes the room. Enforcers dive for cover as automatic fire chews through the drywall. The bitter smell of gunpowder fills the air. Lorenzo roars over the gunfire, screaming at Penelope to get down. He expects to see a terrified civilian curled into a weeping ball. Instead, he finds her seated on the tile behind a steel refrigerator, typing away rapidly. Bullets shred the cabinets inches above her head, yet her face remains a mask of cold focus. She shouts over the noise that she needs exactly 3 minutes. Lorenzo fires back, screaming they do not have 3 minutes left to live. Here is a drastic lesson. True power is not the absence of panic, but the rare ability to keep your absolute focus while your world burns to the ground. Lorenzo returns fire, dropping a gunman trying to flank them. He shouts that Dominic just caught a bullet. Penelope does not miss a keystroke, demanding he buy her 2 more minutes. The Don reloads, shifting his body to shield her from the flying lead. He fires blindly over the marble counter, demanding her plan. She speaks rapidly. The fortress runs on a smart grid. Ricardo hijacked the system to kill the alarms, and she is fighting to rip control back. Suddenly, a massive mercenary vaults the kitchen island, raising a shotgun squarely at Lorenzo's face. In that exact fraction of a second, the entire house drops into absolute pitch blackness. This reveals a profound lesson about conflict. Sometimes, you must deliberately plunge your world into the dark before you can seize control. The second the power dies, the elite mercenary squad is breathing borrowed air. They breached the doors with blind arrogance. Forgetting you never make the rules in another man's house. Penelope screams a command, and an ear-shattering frequency tears through the hidden speakers. The killers drop their rifles, clutching their skulls in agony. Then the ceiling valves open, dumping thick halon gas that pulls the oxygen straight from their lungs. Safe inside the sealed kitchen, Lorenzo and Penelope sit quietly, listening to their executioners choke out in the dark. Lorenzo tosses his night vision gear on the tip, his face a cold, hollow mask. Here is a simple lesson to carry with you. True power is never about holding the loudest weapon. It is about knowing how to control the very air your enemies breathe. Let us look at the sheer heartbreak of this moment together. Lorenzo glides through that pitch-black room like a shadow, dismantling the hit squad sent by the man who raised him. When the gunfire fades, he hits the backup lights, revealing a graveyard of men he once trusted. Blood runs down his face, but he does not flinch. Physical cuts mean nothing compared to the crushing agony of a father figure twisting the knife in his back. He finds Penelope on the cold kitchen tile. Her body trembles from the adrenaline, but her eyes burn with a dangerous fire. She is entirely ready for war. Remember this tonight. Sometimes the fire inside your soul simply must burn and a whole lot brighter than the heartbreak trying to drag you under. The silence in that shattered kitchen weighs a heavy toll. Lorenzo reaches down with his battered hand, and Penelope hesitates before gripping it tight. He pulls her to her feet, but does not let go. His untouchable mafia boss armor has completely melted away into the shadows. He lowers his voice to a raucous whisper, telling her she just saved his life. Penelope scrambles to rebuild her walls, stammering out cold logic. She claims she only protected him because she needs his resources to survive. It is a desperate defense. Lorenzo sees right through it. He steps closer, ignoring the carnage outside, and gently brushes the ash from her hair. We all build massive walls of cold logic to guard our fragile hearts, but the right willowy person will always strew the bricks. Every criminal in that underworld looked at Penelope and saw an invisible accountant, but Lorenzo sees a glorious mastermind. He leans in close, the air thick with tension, and runs his rough thumb along her jawline. In a low breath, he tells her he sees the beautiful monster hiding beneath her fragile skin. To a hardened savage like him, that darkness is absolute perfection. Penelope freezes. For the first time in her lonely life, her deep disguise has fallen away. This man does not want to fix her broken pieces. He is entirely mesmerized by her ruthless mind. Hold tightly to this undeniable truth. The right person will never try to erase your dark edges. Instead, they will pull up a chair, sit rightest you shadows, and deeply admire the storm you hide from the world. By the time morning light spills through the shattered windows, the safe house feels like a cold tomb. The crew scrubs away the blood, but the suffocating sting of a father's betrayal still hangs heavy in the air. Lorenzo paces the floor like a caged animal, his head wrapped in bandages. He screams into a burner phone, his soul bleeding out because the mentor who raised him just ordered his execution. In the corner, Penelope sits perfectly still in a leather chair. She has not slept, but her mind is moving a million miles an hour. Loyalty in this dark underworld might be a cheap illusion, but a sharply calculated mind is pure gold. While Lorenzo drowns in his fiery rage, Penelope is already quietly tracking the absolute financial destruction of his former mentor's entire empire. For 7 agonizing hours, Penelope has barely blinked, rerouting millions in dirty money through shadow servers. The silence snaps when Lorenzo slams his phone against the desk. He yells that his old boss just bought the police commissioners and is actively tearing down their street operations. Penelope does not even flinch. She takes a slow sip of her bitter coffee, looking at him with chilling calm. Lorenzo wants to fight a bloody street war, but his mentor is playing corporate monopoly with stolen billions. Here is a hard truth about navigating this world blind. Brute force will always bleed out against a quietly calculated strategy. She does not need a weapon to ruin this man. She is simply going to sever his cash flow and watch his entire empire slowly drown. Penelope meets his furious gaze, and the drops dating task is already finished. While he was raging, she quietly locked every offshore shell account his old mentor owned. But she knows that is merely a temporary bleed. To truly bury Ricardo before his elite charity Gallatin I must destroy the politicians feeding him power. Lorenzo leans over her screen, demanding the puppet master's name. A wicked smile touches her lips as she whispers the name of a prominent state senator who has been draining pension funds to keep the mafia afloat. Let this serve as a powerful lesson to anyone playing arrogant games. Boundless greed will always leave a paper trail. Once Penelope leaks those hidden files, that corrupt politician is trading his luxury suit for a cold prison cell. The strategy is flawless, but Lorenzo is paralyzed by doubt. He warns her that this senator is a paranoid ghost, hiding his digital ledgers on an offline server inside a guarded fortress. Penelope just lets out a slow, tired sigh. Stick with me here, because her trap is pure artistic genius. She calmly reminds Lorenzo that no matter how high the walls are, nobody is completely clean. It turns out this untouchable politician has a crippling addiction to antique art, recently buying a priceless vase through a shadow auction. Burn this harsh reality into your mind. Our most desperate indulgences are almost always the exact keys to our own destruction. With a dark smirk, Penelope confesses she planted a sleeper virus in that auction house network over 12 months ago. The patience of this woman is beautiful. The second the senator's assistant clicked on that digital receipt, Penelope's malware woke up and shredded their security grid. She casually mentions she has been reading the politician's deepest secrets for 2 weeks. Lorenzo stares at her, frozen between terror and breathless admiration. He thought he hired a quiet accountant, but he actually invited a digital grim reaper into his life. She had the checkmate ready before his mentor's betrayal even broke his heart. Penelope just shrugs, admitting she finds comfort in holding the dirty secrets of powerful men. Let this be a fundamental rule of survival. Never throw away the receipts on your enemies. For the first time all week, the heavy sorrow lifts, and Lorenzo genuinely laughs out loud. Lorenzo is entirely captivated by the quiet violence in her soul. His sorrow is replaced by fiery vengeance, urging her to pull the trigger and watch his old mentor panic. But Penelope is already beyond him. She smiles a cold smile, whispering that the stolen ledgers are currently bouncing through ghost servers. In 10 minutes, the city news desks will receive the instant truth. Let this sink in. Never simply threaten to take down the demons in your life. Take the shot while they are still breathing. Lorenzo realizes tonight's glamorous charity gala will soon transform into a devastating psychological war zone. Closing her laptop, she promises there will be no messy shoot, only a perfect checkmate. But first, she notes with a heavy gaze she needs some proper armor. Penelope meets his eyes, and the quiet accountant is entirely gone. If she is stepping out of her safe shadows to dismantle a Mafia Empire, she can no longer hide inside worn-out sweaters. She needs razor-sharp armor. Lorenzo looks at her and sees the Dark Queen stepping up to the chessboard. He dials his right-hand man, ordering an exclusive collection of designer gowns brought upstairs. The scene then shifts to the grand ballroom. Massive crystal chandeliers cast light over hundreds of fake, glittering smiles as the most prestigious charity event of the year begins. Never forget this dark truth about the world we navigate. The most vicious predators do not hide in filthy alleys. They wear expensive tailored suits, hold vintage champagne, and smile right at you. Picture Ricardo standing by a champagne fountain, inhaling the ballroom air like a king surveying his kingdom. His tailored tuxedo barely hides the venom pumping through his veins. Beside him stands Arthur, Penelope's cowardly former boss, sweating through his collar. Ricardo forces a glass into the trembling man's hand. He boasts that the boy he raised, Lorenzo, is currently rotting in the ashes of the North Shore estate. By tomorrow's Moe's violent takeover will be absolute. But Arthur vibrates with sheer terror, whispering about the deadly consequences of loose ends. Listen closely. Here is a life lesson you cannot afford to ignore. Blind arrogance is a comforting poison, and popping the champagne before crossing the Schlink is always a fatal miscalculation. Listen, you and I are about to watch an empire fall. Arthur is choking on his own words, terrified, trying to warn them that Penelope vanished with their darkest secrets. Ricardo just laughs, dismissing her as some frightened nobody cowering in the shadows. Then the air in the ballroom turns to ice. The string quartet drags to a scraping halt. Hundreds of faces turn toward the grand staircase as the heavy oak doors swing wide. Lorenzo stands there in a midnight blue tuxedo, carrying the suffocating gravity of a ghost coming back for his stolen crown. He locks eyes with the surrogate father who tried to put him in the ground. Keep this life lesson close to your heart. Never turn your back on the quiet people you push into the dark. Sooner or later, fate always collects its debts. Lorenzo stands at the top of those stairs like a king claiming his bloody throne. But look closer. He is not the one pulling the breath from the room. It is the woman on his arm. Penelope has finally burned her camouflage to ash. She wears a custom emerald green velvet gown, a physical weapon that traces every curve she spent years hiding. It is a silent, heavy declaration of total war. Her nervous, tight bun is gone. Her dark hair spills down her shoulders in rich waves. The thick glasses are missing, revealing a cold, sharp gaze that perfectly mirrors her devastating mind. Here is a real lesson for you tonight. Your most powerful transformation happens the moment you refuse to shrink down to keep other people comfortable. She does not just look beautiful. She looks like absolute, inevitable ruin. She is an absolute menace walking into that room. Arthur stares up at her, completely paralyzed. His crystal glass slips right through his shaking fingers, shattering on the marble floor with a sharp crack. All the blood drains from his face. Beside him, Ricardo drops that arrogant smirk, his eyes darting frantically toward the exit doors like a trapped rat. Lorenzo and Penelope glide down the grand staircase, parting the sea of terrified guests. Lorenzo leans in close, his voice dropping to a deep rumble. He calls her his queen and asks for her opening move. Penelope flashes a smile colder than a dead winter night. "Isolate the king," she whispers. "Remember this simple lesson. When you learn to plot your next move in total silence, your final victory will make all the noise you ever need." The tension in that ballroom is so heavy you could choke on it. The couple stops dead in front of Ricardo. Two of his guards step up to look tough, but Lorenzo barely blinks. He just flicks his wrist. Instantly, Dominic and three massive enforcers bleed out of the dark shadows, hands resting quietly on their weapons. The threat hangs over the room like a blade. Ricardo swallows hard, sweat pooling at his collar. He forces out a pathetic shaking laugh to save face, joking that he heard Lorenzo met with a fatal lung accident. Lorenzo just stares right through the man. He softly replies that the rumors of his death were wildly exaggerated. The life lesson here is clear. A true king never has to raise his voice, because real authority is always a steady force backed by brutal preparation. Lorenzo ignores Arthur, who is chiseling in his shoes. Penelope locks eyes with the boss who made her life hell. With a voice like cracking ice, she resigns, casually adding she will not be in on Arthur panics, spitting that she does not belong among these elites. Penelope does not blink. She calmly states she belongs exactly where she chooses to stand. Watch her neck move, because it is an absolute masterpiece of revenge. She pivots to Ricardo and drops a heavy bomb. His main financial backer was raided by the FBI exactly 30 minutes ago. Ricardo plays dumb, but Penelope smiles with the cold grace of a predator. Remember this simple lesson. Never let anyone dictate your true worth. You alone set your boundaries, and you always claim your own space in this world. Penelope dismantles him right there under the chandeliers. She clinically tears his operation to shreds. She points out that without his backer's cash, he cannot pay his muscle. Without those soldiers, he loses the city ports. Without the 40 million he tried to steal, he is just a broken man in a borrowed suit. Ricardo drops the charming mask. He steps into her space, blind with rage that she blocked his funds. He threatens to burn the hotel down, bragging about his 50 armed men waiting out back. Penelope is absolute ice. She pulls a phone from her clutch and politely corrects his math. He actually has 50 mercenaries expecting a payout at exactly 9 p.m. Here is a hard life lesson for you. Loyalty bought with cold cash evaporates the breeze that the money dries up. She casually glances at her watch, announcing to the quiet room that it is exactly 8:59 p.m. The tension feels like a ticking time bomb. The wealthy guests back away, leaving a wide ring around the standoff. Ricardo is sweating straight through his collar. He hisses that she is bluffing, bragging that his offshore accounts hide behind heavy encryption. Penelope tilts her head with terrifying calm. They were secure, she whispers, right up until she hacked the system and burned his firewalls to the ground. She falls silent, watching her glowing screen as the final seconds bleed away. Take notes, this life lesson. Never underestimate the destructive power of pure intelligence. A sharp mind will tear down an empire without throwing a single punch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ricardo's phone vibrates violently in his pocket, buzzing like a trapped hornet. His hands shake as he pulls it into the light. The screen is blowing up with panicked messages from British Group. Every transaction bounced. All accounts are frozen solid and outside, his hired muscle realizes they are not getting paid to fight a dangerous boss, so they melt away into the dark. Ricardo looks up, his eyes completely desperate. 2 years of plotting a bloody takeover, erased in 60 seconds by an accountant in a velvet dress. He screams that she ruined his life. Lorenzo steps in front of her, softly replying that Ricardo ruined himself. The life lesson here is simple. Greed builds a fragile house of cards, and reality is the cold wind that knocks it flat. Lorenzo drops his voice to a deadly whisper, reminding the traitor that breaking their oath makes him a dead man. Pushed into pure desperation, Ricardo snaps. Knowing he cannot beat Lorenzo, he draws a hidden combat knife and lunges straight at Penelope. Stick with me, because this is the moment her transformation becomes physical. That shrinking girl is gone. She does not scream or freeze. She smoothly pivots on her heels, slipping out of the blade's path like a ghost. Lorenzo moves with impossible speed, catching Ricardo's arm mid-strike and twisting it with savage force. A sickening bone snap echoes across the silent room. The life lesson here is obvious. When you blindly try to drag others down with your sinking ship, you only guarantee your own brutal downfall. Ricardo screams in raw agony as the knife clatters to the floor. Before his knees hits the marbles, Lorenzo's hand clamps around his throat, lifting the traitor off his feet. Lorenzo looks like a demon, his dark eyes swirling with unhinged murder. He snarls into Ricardo's face, promising he never gets to touch her, let alone breathe the same air. It is a terrifying display of primal devotion. Lorenzo tosses him aside like trash. Dominic and the enforcers drag the sobbing man away into the shadows to handle official family business. Watching this brutal scene,
Arthur completely breaks down. He collapses to his knees, weeping for mercy. Here is the heavy life lesson for today.
Your actions have severe consequences, and apologizing only after the steel trap snaps shut will never save you. Arthur weeps on the floor, desperately trying to throw Penelope under the bus to save his own skin. She stares down at this pathetic manic manager who spent 3 years abusing her. She feels zero pity, only an ice-cold detachment. She brands him an accessory to massive fraud and treason. Then she twists the knife, calmly calling him utterly incompetent. She promises that Lorenzo will not take his life tonight. Arthur pauses, a pathetic spark of hope shining on his tear-stained face. Penelope instantly shatters it. She leans in close and whispers that she just forwarded a file of his personal embezzlement straight to the IRS. Here is a beautiful life lesson. Treating people badly will always come back to bury you, especially when those exact people hold the keys to your darkest secrets. Listens, you and I need to take a second to appreciate this masterpiece together. Penelope looks dead at Arthur and promises him he is not dying tonight. Oh no, it is so much worse. He will rot in a federal cell until the end of time. Arthur completely folds, sobbing on the floor, while hotel security rushes in, totally clueless about the bloodbath that just went down.
Then we look back at Lorenzo, just heaving under that expensive suit, fully jacked on adrenaline. He steps up to Penelope, ignoring the panicked crowd, and just exhales.
He is utterly mesmerized by this woman who just nuked a criminal empire using nothing but her brain. Here is the final life lesson for the night. The absolute deadliest weapon you can ever bring to a fight is a sharp, deeply focused mind. Let us pull apart this heavy moment together, you and I. Lorenzo stands there, staring straight into Penelope's eyes. His voice drops into a dangerous rumble as he calls her magnificent. For a single heartbeat, her untouchable armor shatters. You can feel the wild thrill racing beneath her velvet dress. She looks up totally unbothered and admits she prefers holding the reins. And Chicago's most lethal ghost? He just grabs her face, ignoring the frantic whispers of the wealthy crowd. He leans in close, daring her to take the wheel, confessing he is entirely at her mercy. The lesson here is simple. True power is never about terrorizing every room you enter. It is about knowing exactly when to surrender your heavy crown to the right person. That kiss is an explosion of raw, untamed control. That kiss is pure gravity, fueled by adrenaline and the heavy weight of a shifting empire. She kisses him back with savage grace, proving the nervous wallflower she used to be is buried forever. Now, she is the queen of the Chicago shadows, holding the most dangerous man in the city right in her palm. Fast forward to morning, and the entire board has flipped. Ricardo Costa is wiped from the map, buried under cold concrete before dawn. Arthur is rotting in a damp county jail cell, broke and staring down a 50-year sentence. Meanwhile, the paper trail miraculously dances right around Lorenzo's crew. Take this lesson with you tonight. The loudest guy in the room is always the easiest mark, while the quiet ones silently rewrite the rules in the dark. Penelope is never going back to that dust-choked basement. She traded those buried memories for a massive glass penthouse at the top of the Bianca Tower. Picture this cold, modern fortress, lined with heavy steel and humming with massive server racks. Lorenzo is lingering in the doorway, swirling a glass of top-shelf bourbon, completely mesmerized by her. It has been 3 weeks since the madness of that gala, The bruises have faded, but the power dynamic of the underworld is permanently changed. She stands barefoot on a priceless rug, wearing his oversized shirt, staring intensely at a glowing digital map of the Midwest. The lesson here is profound. When you finally find the courage to level up your internal mindset, your physical reality will always naturally catch up. Her hair is in a messy bun, a pencil stuck behind her ear. To anyone else, she looks like an exhausted girl grinding through a late shift. But Lorenzo knows exactly what he is looking at. He sees a brilliant general plotting a city takeover without pulling her eyes from the monitors. She calmly calls him out for staring. Lorenzo smirks, his voice dropping low as he admits he is enjoying the view. He strolls over, leaves his glass on the desk, and pulls her close, wrapping his arms tight around her waist. He breathes in that warm mix of vanilla and espresso, softly reminding her she has been working for 12 straight hours. Remember this lesson. Ambition is a powerful engine, but you must always pause to appreciate the real ones standing in your corner. Listen closely, because you and I both know how these mistakes happen. Lorenzo whispers that the rival Irish mob can wait. Penelope sighs, melting back against his chest. Their romance is locked inside this bulletproof tower. On the streets, she is feared as his ruthless partner, but up here, she is the only soft spot this brutal boss has ever allowed himself. Suddenly, she taps a key, zooming the map onto the Southside docks. She warns him that Declan Fitzpatrick is not waiting. The Irish boss thinks their territory is weak, trying to sneak his cargo through without paying the tax. Here is a crucial life lesson. Never mistake quiet stillness for weakness. They are usually just studying your every move from the safety of the shadows. Declan believes Lorenzo went soft because Penelope used to be an accountant. It is a fatal mistake built on blind arrogance. Hearing this, Lorenzo instantly snaps. His violent energy spikes. Ready for war. Declan is a classic thug who uses a heavy bat for every problem, and Lorenzo wants to send hitmen to the docks to burn it all down. He wants to remind everyone who owns Chicago. But Penelope shuts that rage down in 1 second. She places a cool hand on his clenched jaw, reminding him that the reckless Lorenzo of the past is dead. Going in with guns blazing is messy, loud, and incredibly expensive. The life lesson is crystal clear. Brute force is usually the worst possible. Quiet intelligence will always beat swinging wildly in the dark. She whispers that they do not use bullets anymore. They use their brains, yes. Lorenzo gets shivers, staring at the terrifying genius of the woman he loves. He asks for the plan, and she pulls up a massive web of hidden financial data. Declan washes his dirty money through luxury hotels in Dublin and an offshore hedge fund. Lorenzo warns her that not even federal agents can touch a setup like that. But Penelope flashes the coldest smirks, her face glowing in the blue light of the monitors. She calmly whispers that Declan might be a ghost to the government, but he is completely exposed to her. Take this vital life lesson to heart. True knowledge is the ultimate weapon. When you understand how the system works, you hold all the real power in the room. Stick with me, because you and I are about to a brutal game of psychological chess. Penelope spent 3 days hunting down the routing numbers Declan uses to pay off foreign judges. Now, this brute demands a sit-down at the Drake Hotel, threatening a massive street war for territory. Penelope instantly says she is going, making Lorenzo freeze in total panic. He flat out refuses, calling Declan a wild dog who will only try to bully her. But Penelope kills that protective vibe with one deadly glare. She tells Lorenzo he is going to stand quietly behind her chair and let her do the talking. Here is an essential life lesson. Real power never actually has to yell to command respect. She coldly declares it is time the city learns exactly who holds the leash. The tension inside this room at the Drake Hotel is literally suffocating. Picture Declan, a tank of a man in a custom tweed suit, backed by 4 armed goons. Across the table sits Penelope, looking flawless in a blood-red blazer. Lorenzo looms silently behind her chair like a shadow of pure violence. Declan acts incredibly arrogant, lighting a cigar, blowing smoke across the table, and mocking them. He laughs at Lorenzo, claiming that handing an empire to a bean counter is a pathetic joke. He even leans in and calls Penelope sweetheart, barking that the bleeding docs are not some cute spreadsheet. Please remember this lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they appear neat and exceptionally polite. In the real world, that arrogant assumption will absolutely destroy you. Declan keeps bragging that you cannot crunch numbers when his thugs are breaking kneecaps. Penelope does not even blink. She calmly opens a black leather folder. Her voice is so icy, it drops the temperature instantly, informing Mr. Fitzpatrick he owes them $4.2 million in unpaid taxes. Declan laughs in her face, asking if this accountant is trying to audit my mob boss. He screams threats, flexing his 300 soldiers, and swearing to turn Chicago into a war zone. Penelope stays completely still, radiating a terrifying, quiet confidence. Here is a vital life lesson. The person who loses their temper in a negotiation always loses the war. Totally unbothered, she quietly reminds him that 300 armed men require a very steady paycheck. She looks him in the eyes, whispering that payroll takes liquid cash, a resource he no longer has. Declan stops laughing immediately. The arrogance drains from his face as he demands to know what she means. Penelope does not raise her voice. She just slides a piece of paper across the table, casually mentioning that at 8 in the morning, an anonymous packet landed at corporate enforcement in Dublin. It held ledgers proving he washed cartel money through his hotels. Declan turns purple with rage and lunges forward. Instantly, Lorenzo drops his hands to his weapon, freezing the brute in his tracks. Listen to me, because you and I both need to remember this life lesson. Your darkest secrets will always leave a hidden paper trail somewhere in the world. Declan glares, spitting out that she is bluffing. Declan is out here screaming his servers are totally bulletproof. But Penelope is about to brutally shatter that delusion. She absolutely roasts him for hiring bargain bin security scrubs who used the most laughable encryption ever. She literally hacked his entire mainframe while waiting for her morning espresso to brew. You and I have probably both seen people make this exact mistake, so let this be a solid life lesson. Never cut corners on your foundation, because this cheaping out will eventually cost you everything. She drops, like telling him the feds are seizing his luxury hotels right now. His offshore money is frozen solid. Sickening horror washes over Declan. She casually reveals he is totally bankrupt and his 300 armed goons will need a new boss by tomorrow. Penelope goes in for the kill shot. With a razor-thin smirk, she casually mentions the Bianca family is currently hiring. Declan snaps his neck, looking at Lorenzo, begging for that old-school gangster mercy. Lorenzo just stands there like statues of pure eye satisfaction. Penelope slams her folder shut, giving Declan exactly 24 hours to vanish from Chicago. If he sticks around past noon, Lorenzo will not even need a weapon. She will just text the coordinates of his wife's hidden villa to the raging cartel he just screwed over. Always remember this crucial truth. When you are totally outmatched, swallow your pride and walk away before you lose what matters most. Declan slowly stands up,
shaking with a wild mix of helpless rage and absolute bone-chilling terror.
Declan stares at the woman he thought he could easily push around, but now he sees the absolute devil staring right back into his soul. He folds and leaves in dead silence, his enforcers scrambling like lost puppies. The second those heavy doors click shut, Lorenzo buries his face in Penelope's neck, his shoulders shaking with euphoric laughter. He murmurs a promise to never, ever negotiate against her. She just smirks and tells him to always read the fine print. That right there is the ultimate life lesson for anyone building an empire. Always read the fine print, both in your deals and in the people you trust. Over the next 6 months, her brilliant system runs flawlessly, trading all that messy street violence for a clean, absolutely untouchable digital monopoly. Let us step into the shadows tonight, you and I. Picture a user's Sintancore profits explode by 400% cent, yet the streets remain eerily quiet. Not a single drop of blood is spilled. The Chicago cops are paralyzed, while the Bionk family quietly swallows half the financial district. But here is a timeless truth you should always carry with you. Massive success will always paint a permanent target on your back. The most lethal predators in this world do not wear ski masks. They flash federal badges. Special Agent Jonathan Miller has been hunting Lorenzo for 10 exhausting years, sacrificing his marriage and sanity to build a case. Yet every single time Miller gets close, the evidence vanishes like smoke, and his witnesses magically forget their own names. It is a rainy Tuesday, wrapping the city in a moody vibe. Penelope is chilling on the penthouse sofa, bathed in the pale glow of her laptop, while Lorenzo sips heavy red wine nearby. Without warning, the rapid rhythm of her typing comes to a dead, chilling stop. She watches a weird string of foreign code bleed across her monitor. Here is something you must always remember. Pay close attention to the quiet warning signs before the real hurricane hits. She calls out to Lorenzo. Her voice is barely a whisper, but its sheer gravity makes him snap straight to attention. His relaxed posture completely vanishes, instantly replaced by the coiled tension of a cornered wolf. She looks up, dead serious, and drops the ultimate bomb. Someone is actively inside their private, encrypted network. Her eyes dart across the screen, confirming the absolute worst-case scenario. This is not a random outside hack. It is a straight-up inside job, bleeding their darkest secrets to a federal server in Quantico. Lorenzo shoots us, a dark fury rising in his chest as he demands a name. Penelope rips through thousands of lines of code in seconds, locking onto the physical device, stealing their lives. When she reads the name, a suffocating wave of betrayal washes over the room. Peter Kensington. The air goes ice cold. Peter is their top lawyer, a guy who stood by Lorenzo for 15 years. This brings us to a harsh reality we all eventually face. The most agonizing betrayals never come from faceless strangers in the dark. They always come from the exact people you trust the absolute most. Peter was supposed to be family. Lorenzo asks if she is absolutely sure, his voice dropping into that terrifying, dead calm tone that always hits right before extreme violence. Penelope softly explains Peter uses a high-tech transmitter disguised as an expensive fountain pen. Every time he visits the penthouse, that pen silently drinks up their files and hands them to the feds. Lorenzo walks over to the window, staring down at the rainy streets. He looks like a man completely shattered from the inside. He whispers about how he constantly protected Peter, even paying for it at college. Listen to me closely. Here, you can pour an endless sea of money and huge favors over someone, but you can never actually buy true loyalty. Penelope just walks over and holds him tight, Holding him in the dim light, Penelope reminds him that raw fear makes men do terribly stupid things. She figures the feds dragged some dirty secret out of Peter and squeezed his neck until he broke. Lorenzo does not even blink. He states, with clarity, that he will kill the lawyer tonight at the docks. It is not an empty threat. It is a stone-cold fact. But Penelope holds him tighter and refuses to let him leave. Lorenzo spins around, his anger boiling over, shouting that he is literally handing their entire empire over to the government. Here is an essential truth to always remember. Reacting purely out of blind rage will only destroy your own position of power. Penelope stares right back into his furious eyes and firmly tells him she has a much more devious plan. She tells him, a quick bullet is way too kind for a backstabber, and a bleeding body only gives the feds a shiny photograph. Stay with me here, because you and I are about to watch a masterpiece of vengeance unfold. She promises Lorenzo if the feds want to show, they will get a performance that will tear their task force apart. Lorenzo feels his blinding anger morph into a dark, calculated curiosity. Penelope knows the lead agent is desperately starving for a massive drug bust just to justify his budget. There is a powerful life lesson here. The ultimate revenge is taking your enemy's own trap and slamming it shut right on their neck. Peter thinks he's stealing real files, but he is actually sipping from a poisoned well. She is going to plant a beautiful, fatal trap tomorrow morning. Let us look at this plan piece by piece. Penelope P. outlines her trap with the cold precision of a diamond cutter. She is fabricating a ghost file detailing a $50 million shipment of Colombian snow arriving Navy Pier at midnight. She flashes a beautiful bone-chilling smile in the shadows. We are talking perfectly faked guard rotations, phantom license plates, and a flawless forgery of Lorenzo's signature. Lorenzo slowly realizes the pure beauty of it. There is zero product coming. Penelope knows the ambitious federals will swallow this juicy bait whole. He will drag out tactical teams, wasting millions just to raid the freezing wind. Never blindly trust a setup that looks perfectly handed to you, because someone is always pulling the invisible strings behind the scenes. While the feds are freezing in the bitter rowing, chasing phantoms, Lorenzo finally sees the whole picture. A wicked smirk spreads across his face as he realizes Penelope gets unmonitored access to the government network. She tells him the fake intel is just an appetizer. When Peter uploads her file with that bugged pen, it releases a sleeper virus straight into the heart of Quantico. The exact second agents click open the file, the trap brutally snaps shut. Penelope is going to incinerate every photograph, fingerprint, and shred of hard evidence the law holds on the Young family. By Saturday morning, his massive empire legally will not even exist. Brainpower will always be the ultimate weapon. You never need messy physical violence when you can erase your history with a few smart keystrokes. Lorenzo crosses the room and takes her ends in face in his hands, holding her like she is the only real thing left in his chaotic world. He looks deep into her eyes, asking if she knows how completely he worships her brilliant mind. Even the most hardened boss can fall hopelessly to his knees for the right partner. Penelope smirks, kisses him softly, and whispers to save the worship for later.
Fast forward to Friday night. The freezing winds howl violently off Lake Michigan, making Navy Pier look like a desolate graveyard of rusted metal. Out in the shadows, the desperate federal agent sits in his unmarked vehicle, his heart pounding with raw anticipation. Sometimes we become so blinded by ambition that we sprint headfirst into the fire, ignoring every screaming red flag along the way.
Picture the scene, listeners.
It is holding his eyes glued to a thermal monitor.
He thinks he finally caught his white whale, thanks to a lawyer who traded loyalty for a false sense of safety. But high above the city, inside Lorenzo's penthouse, that same lawyer is drowning in his own skin. Peter sits there, his tailored suit clinging to his trembling back. He is terrified the wire hidden in his pen will pick up his hammering heart. The boss just poured him a drink, and the silence in the room is heavier than a loaded gun. It forces you to realize a harsh truth about betrayal. Long before the boss ever uncovers your secret, the sheer crushing paranoia of selling out your own people will eat you completely alive from the inside out. The air in that penthouse is just thick enough to choke on.
Lorenzo sits at the heavy oak table, his knife slicing through a rare steak with a calm
Beside him sits Penelope, bathed in the cold light of a tablet, entirely detached. Lorenzo notices the lawyer shaking and offers him a drink, noting he looks like a walking corpse. Peter stumbles over his words, desperately blaming his nerves on a sudden illness, and then, without even lifting her eyes from the screen, Penelope softly mentions how exhausting it must be to serve two different masters. The room goes dead. Peter turns to stone, the ice clinking against his glass. We see a tragic truth unfold right here. When you try to play both sides of a dangerous game just to save your own skin, you only guarantee your absolute destruction.
Peter is drowning in real time, his voice cracking as he desperately swears he has no idea what she means. Penelope just lets him thrash. Setting her screen down,
she quietly reveals the devastating truth. For 3 long months, she has been feeding him nothing but fabricated files. She offers a haunting smile, mocking the pathetic wire in his pocket, whispering that his federal handler is losing his career tonight. The lawyer completely fractures. He scrambles blindly toward the elevator, but Dominic steps out of the shadows, leveling the cold steel of a heavy weapon at his chest. Lorenzo barely blinks, gently instructing Peter to take a seat. As the broken man collapses into violent tears, a brutal lesson rises from his ruin. Never fence yourself, you cannot outsmart the quiet architect who built the very trap you walked right into. Let us step into the suffocating reality of that room together. Peter drops entirely, his knees hitting the cold marble as raw sobs tear from his throat. He begs for his existence, pleading that the feds cornered him with the threat of a concrete cell. Penelope stands above his trembling frame, her expression carved from ice. She dismantles his defense, explaining he only ever leaked the exact breadcrumbs she permitted. With a soft tap on her screen, a hijacked security feed from the midnight pier floods the room with harsh light. Peter chokes on his own despair, begging to understand her endgame. She offers a terrifying smile, calling it his grand finale, as tactical trucks violently swarm the docks. The takeaway here is painful but true. The ones who abandon their loyalty out of fear will always become the easiest pawns to sacrifice. The screen pulses with the frantic blue and red police lights cutting through the fog. Armored men violently breach the container Peter promised was holding a fortune in illegal goods. Penelope's voice is a soft murmur as she explains the agent was banking on $50 million into Chicago. Instead, the doors open to reveal thousands of crates of cooking oil, a legal shipment destined for a charity. We watch the agent freeze on camera, realizing his entire career is burning to ash. But Penelope never stops typing. By throwing all his resources at this flashy raid, the agent left his entire digital fortress completely unguarded in the shadows. It leaves us with a haunting reflection. Whenever you obsess over a loud, dazzling distraction, you leave the most vital parts of your world totally undefended against the incoming dark. A soft green checkmark illuminates her face in the dim room, signaling the silent digital slaughter is finished. Penelope finally exhales, the tension leaving her shoulders. In mere heartbeats, decades of the syndicate's bloody history are erased. Wiretaps, photos, and informant logs are reduced to nothing but digital ash. Lorenzo gazes at her with deep reverence. His eyes then, they drift down to the weeping lawyer, turning cold and hollow. He tells Peter that, in the old days, a traitor would be dragged to a debauch's basement and beaten until they broke. But the rules of survival have shifted. Brutality just leaves bloodstains and footage. Erasing your sins in absolute silence makes you an untouchable ghost. There lies a profound truth for us. If you refuse to let your mind and strategy evolve, the harsh reality of the world will simply leave you behind to perish. Lorenzo lets a jagged smile touch his lips, murmuring his queen has perfected the elegant art of total destruction. On the floor, Peter is a hollow shell, sobbing and begging for mercy on the lives of his children. Penelope drifts over to stand beside Lorenzo, staring down at the ruined lawyer. Her voice is a whisper of ice, as she tells him his family's is the sole reason his heart is still beating. She did not need a bullet. Instead, she quietly routed $10 million of dirty offshore money straight into his personal accounts. Peter looks up, his eyes wide with absolute horror. As she explains, she has framed him for robbing the cartel blind. The lesson here is agonizingly clear. You do not need physical violence to completely break a person. Destroying their reputation and taking their sanctuary leaves them with a terrifying fate far worse than death.
Stay with me here.
Because the psychological cruelty is staggering.
Penelope leans in, her voice unnervingly calm as she maps out his doom. By Monday, every asset he possesses will turn to dust.
The feds will cage him for tax evasion, and that humiliated agent will throw him to the wolves to save face. The lawyer crumples inward, his spirit broken. In the suffocating silence, the terrifying realization washes over him. The true apex predator is not the giant holding the artillery, but the quiet girl pulling the digital strings. Lorenzo dismissively waves his hand, ordering the muscle to drag the weeping man away, keeping the slide pen as a dark trophy. Take this wisdom with you into the night. The loudest person demanding attention in the room is rarely the one holding the quiet, devastating power to completely erase your existence. With the traitor gone, the heavy air clears, leaving behind the intoxicating high of a flawless victory. Lorenzo steps to the towering glass windows, his dark eyes scanning the neon veins of the city. Every secret deal down there now belongs to them.
Penelope drifts beside him, resting her head against his shoulder, her hand tracing the steady rhythm of his heart. Lorenzo stares into the night,
softly confessing that the wealthy elite at their clubs are still whispering cruel things about her. It is a tragic flaw in human nature. People are desperately quick to judge what they do not understand. They will laugh at the quiet shadow, entirely unaware she is holding the scissors to their puppet strings. Let this be a profound warning to us all tonight. The quietest souls in the room usually hide the absolute sharpest blades. You and I both know the burning sting of being underestimated. Lorenzo murmured that the high society vultures still see her as a fragile girl who stumbled into power. Penelope slowly looks up,
a dangerous fire reflecting in her eyes. Her voice is smooth as she tells him to let them whisper. Let them comfortably dig their own graves while sleeping on her intellect. Lorenzo leans in,
capturing her lips in a demade kiss that seals their iron grip over the trembling city. He whispers that from this midnight forward, her name will only be spoken like a frightened prayer. The broken wallflower is dead, replaced by a ruthless queen of the underworld. Hold onto this hard truth forever. Never make the fatal error of confusing a person's quiet, enduring patience for a total lack of absolute power. Those arrogant elites completely missed the warning signs. Blinded by theirs, they looked right past the predator, hiding behind a polite stutter. Lorenzo was the only soul willing to look closer and see her twisted genius. He handed her the keys to a sprawling criminal empire, and she brought it to its knees using nothing but the weight of her mind.
Messi switched warfare is dead.
This couple now holds the city hostage through flawless digital dominance. The weeping outcast has been permanently erased, leaving a cold throne for the new architect of chaos. It is a story of beautiful, terrifying vengeance. Let this simple truth echo in your mind tonight. Never look down on the quiet ones hiding in the background, because all they that die to your very existence. True authority never has to raise its voice. It is born in the shadows, fueled by agonizing patience, and unleashed only when the trap is perfectly set. Tell me, did witnessing her chilling evolution leave you as haunted as I am? If you felt the raw satisfaction of watching a forgotten ghost turn into an untouchable queen, leave a like. Shares this with someone who appreciates a devastating burn where the mastermind finally takes her throne. As we close out tonight, remember this inescapable truth. A quiet, calculated strategy will always rip through blind, impulsive rage. Subscribe and join our late night circle for more stories of beautiful vendettas. Leave a comment in the dark below when there's favorite moment, optive wedge waiting for you right here in the next one.